We're always telling your stories, and it's time someone tells ours. We're humans first, journalists second. We chose this career to give you a voice. Now we're voicing ours. It's true, journalism has much room for improvement, but not all hope is lost, and we want your trust back by humanizing one journalist at a time. We're sharing with you what we go through to bring you the news. The pain, the tears, the trauma, and the mental health struggles. It's painful, and sometimes we even work 2 jobs to make ends meet. But we all have something in common. The passion, the joy, and the love we feel for storytelling and holding the powerful accountable. That includes holding ourselves accountable. So here are stories from us. This is how we want to help improve the news industry. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo. Hi everyone, welcome back to The Awakened Journalist and our special project Media Healers. We are now on our 4th season of Media Healers, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Vicky Nguyen. She was in the news industry for a decade, working as a crime reporter, an investigative reporter, an enterprise storyteller, a field producer, and so much more throughout the years. She basically did it all. A skill that is very well known to us journalists. But in March 2022, so recently, she decided to quit the news industry like many of us have chosen to do in the past 2 years. Before quitting news, she was the vice president of the Los Angeles chapter of the Asian American Journalists Association. She also earned the Best Television News Reporting Award issued by Radio and Television News Association of Southern California, and she earned an Emmy Award for the Best Evening Newscast in 2015. But now Vicky is actually the communications manager at the Orange County Department of Education, a path also very well known to journalists who decide to quit the news industry and go into public relations or communications. So Vicky, welcome. I'm so honored to have you here with us today, and I'm so honored to have you sharing your story with us as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to even be considered, and I'm thankful that you're creating this space for us to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicky. So I always start with everyone asking them why they first decided to become a journalist. And I love this question because this is, look at your face, this is when everyone's face lights up. And it's like, we went into the career and into the industry with so much hope, so much joy. And it's beautiful to hear why everyone landed in journalism.
And I'm so glad you're asking this question, because I find that even if you've left, thinking back to the moments when you realize this is the journey, the path that you wanted to go on, it still sparks a lot of joy. And so my story might be traditional. A lot of journalists or former journalists might agree, but when I was growing up, instead of watching cartoons, I loved watching the news and coming home from school every day and sitting at the dinner table. I would always want to tell my parents about who did what, who said what was the biggest story of the day on the campus, what we learned. If there was a new song that our teacher taught us, I wanted to sing it to them. And if I felt like I didn't have their undivided attention, you best believe I would start all over again. You know, my newscast would start all over again. And I just felt like that was what I loved. And I loved watching the morning news while I was getting ready for school in the morning. And then I would be so excited to watch ABC 7 at 4 p.m. after school ended. And then, of course, the evening newscast, and we would watch that together. And I really think it was a way for my parents, who were immigrants from Vietnam, it was a way for them to get a glimpse of what was happening in their community, you know, outside of where they worked and outside of where they lived. And so I really loved that. I loved getting the OC Register delivered on Sundays. And that was just what I always wanted to do. But there was definitely a moment where I felt like, okay, wow, that is really what I wanted to do. It was when I was in 7th grade. 9/11 happened, and I loved watching the Today Show. And that morning, Ann Curry, one of the anchors, instead of sitting on the sofa, she was in front of the rubble, and she wasn't wearing a nice jewel tone dress, but she was wearing just a long sleeve collared white shirt buttoned up with jeans. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is someone that I have admired, someone I respect. And she was standing out there in the middle of history. And I just thought, what a tragic event, but wow, you could be a part of, sharing the stories of the people who were hurt and, letting people know about what happened. And so that part of my childhood, I really think cemented my journey.
Wow, and isn't it beautiful, like, when you get to see those, I guess, those anchors and reporters and correspondents that we really, really looked up to, just literally witnessing history and telling it firsthand.
It's I can't even describe it. Maybe to regular news watchers, maybe they don't care, but for someone like us, we just felt pulled to the television. We just couldn't look away.
Yeah, no, I
Mhm.
agree 100%. Okay, so that was definitely something that probably shaped you even more to become a journalist, which is beautiful. And then, how was landing your first job? Like, fast forward from seventh grade and watching, 9/11. How
Yeah.
was landing your first job?
So I went to Cal State Fullerton, and I actually landed my first job within a month. But during that time, I was seeing a lot of the people that I graduated with land jobs. And they went to Bakersfield, they went to Palm Springs, and I thought, what is it about them? And what is it about me? Why haven't I landed a job yet? And it was so scary. But then I got a call, and it was a station in Fargo, North Dakota. I had to look up North Dakota, right? Because I knew it was in the States, but I didn't know exactly where. I thought maybe it's where, near Florida, where the Carolinas are, but it's actually in the middle of the country. And then within the day, I got another call from Bismarck, North Dakota. And I thought, what is it with these Midwest states? But I took a job for the NBC station in Bismarck, North Dakota. It's KFYR TV because they offered me $4,000 more than Fargo. And for
Oh
me,
man.
back then, Fargo was a really great place to be because it was a college town, more diversity, better restaurants. But then Bismarck offered, it's a capital city, but they offered $4,000 more. And to a freshly, new graduate, that was important. And so I took that, and really it was only $26,000 a year. But at that time, it made a big deal.
For sure, for sure. And $4,000 in our salary makes a big deal. Like, people
Yeah,
think we get paid a lot of money to be
absolutely
on
not.
TV. No, it is not glamorous at all. At least not for most of us. Only
Yeah.
very few percentage of us it is a
Hmm.
glamorous job. And even so, for the people that have made it all the way to the top, it's still very difficult.
Climb.
Vicky, so let's jump into your last year in news.
Mm,
So you quit in March 2022, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
yeah.
And could you just lead me and guide me through that story and what led you to the decision of quitting news?
Yeah. So we had our first child, our son, in July of 2020. At that point, I was still gung ho about news, still very interested in continuing this path. I've seen a lot of moms, first time moms, experienced moms continue in the news business. And I never thought that I would steer away and do, I'm sorry, do anything different. This was the path that I've set on since I was a child, and there was no way I was going to divert from it. And when I went back to work, it was election night, 2020, and I was still passionate. I still felt like this is what I'm going to do. And when I returned, I never made an excuse or did anything to allow anyone to say, Vicky has changed because she had a child. She's not picking up those shifts anymore. No, I did not. And because I'm very fortunate. I have my parents who live, 3 miles away. First grandchild, they're more than happy to have him there all day, every day. And so I was able to focus on my career. My family, knowing that this is very important to me, they've always supported me, and they're willing to take on more work to allow me to continue to chase my dreams. And so I continued to work. I did everything, didn't call in sick, didn't even request a vacation, none of that. And all of a sudden, in the last 6 months of work, there was one moment where I found out that someone within the same role made $27,000 more than I did.
Oh.
And that person told me, we're friends. That person told me, and I thought, oh, you make that much more? And I do live shots and you don't? That person doesn't do live shots.
Yeah.
They refuse to do live shots. When it's breaking news, that person isn't even on the list to be sent out.
Wow.
I volunteer to go cover breaking news.
Yeah.
And I cover more than one beat. This person's strictly 6-1.
Yeah.
And I was heartbroken. And so when it came to negotiating a new contract, which I'm grateful for, not a lot of people nowadays find it easy to get their contracts renewed. Yeah. I brought it up, and I even created a PDF, a PowerPoint, showing them all of these things that I have done within the scope of my position. But then these are all of the other things that I've done outside of my position that I believe truly contribute to our brand, our mission. And this is why I believe I deserve to make this much. No, I was told you're going to get the standard 3% raise, and you should be thankful. You should be thankful that you're getting a contract, because nowadays in this industry, in this market, people are receiving new contracts without a raise. And so I negotiated again, and the person said no. And then I put that number on the table again, and all I wanted was to match that reporter. Wow. And they still said no after the third time that I asked. And so I spoke to mentors. I spoke to people around me. At that point in time, I didn't have anything lined up, because this was my dream. This is what I wanted to do. And so I stayed with it. I signed another contract. I did it. And then I knew that the contract was ending. My new contract was ending, and I had an option to extend it for a year. That was when I started to feel and notice things before. The things that I would never consider or care about before, because it was always, Vicky, just push through it. If you do this, if you say yes to this, you're going to be able to move on. You're going to be able to move up. You're going to get this, you're going to get that. Just do it. Grit your teeth, do it. But then I started to feel every single time things were, asked of me, and I thought, well, I don't want to do that, actually.
Yeah.
If I'm not getting paid extra, I don't want to do that. If I have to take time from my family to do that, but then don't get this, I don't see it. And then I started to ask PR people, PIOs, whenever I was out on assignments, and I would ask them, especially if I knew they were a former journalist, I would ask them, well, what was your journey like? What was that moment that it clicked for you, that you had to leave the news business? How did you do it? Do you regret it? Was it easy? Did people take you seriously when you applied? And I asked so many different people in 6 months, people who were former journalists, people who were not journalists, who went, straight from college to PR, people who left news for PR and then came back to news and then left PR. And I just basically interviewed so many different people. And when I started speaking with my family about it and they were supportive of it, then that was when I started to tell the same PR people that I spoke with before, I would let them know, you know what, I'm ready to leave news. If you hear of anything, any position that you think I would be able to blend into, let me know. And I think that did wonders when I was able to finally verbalize it and let people know and was open to the idea of leaving. They welcomed me. So I think a lot of people might be surprised when we say, oh, after 10 years, after 20 years, we're leaving news. And they think we've made a rash decision, but really we do a lot of research before we leave.
Yeah. Wow. And I applaud you for that because it takes courage.
Thank
Um, and I think for any journalist who's listening to this interview right now, just know that you don't have to push through anything. We don't have to push
you.
to stay in the news industry. Um, if there's situations like the one Vicky was having where we're not getting paid our worth and what our work is worth and the time that we're putting in and we don't feel valued,
Mhm.
then it's time to reevaluate certain choices and certain boundaries as well. Maybe, maybe people don't have to quit news or leave the industry, but definitely start drawing those boundaries like Vicky was doing. Like, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to give you more of my time when I can be spending it with my child and my family. And that leads me to the next question. How was it for you? And looking back now, being a mom in news, because um, although there's definitely some companies that are doing a great job at welcoming motherhood in the industry, there's definitely a lot of work that still needs to be done in news to welcome new mothers.
Yeah, I've heard of other O and O's that give their moms 4 months off paid. For me, I forget the exact amount they gave me, but to me, I thought it was generous.
Yeah.
I never felt like I was going to lose my job when I was on maternity leave. I felt like my place was solid. But it was definitely hard. I mean, I within the first month I went back, there was a big breaking news story, a mass shooting. Then the month after that, there was a wildfire. And every time in between live shots, getting the interviews, filming, writing, and all that, I was pumping in the car. And so imagine during a wildfire, I'm in the car and I would have to ask the photographer, hey, do you mind taking a lap around maybe for 20 minutes so I could pump and write at the same time?
Gosh.
I think they say that you can take breaks, right? But in reality, if you're a really good news reporter, I feel like breaks don't come often and you don't allow yourself to take a break because the story is at stake and the story equates to people, especially during those breaking news situations. So it was very difficult for me to time it. So every 3 hours I had to pump, to make sure that my son would have food, but then also keep up with work. And I did it for a long time, but I just felt like I was depleted. At the end of the day, when it was time off, I was done. I didn't have energy. I was probably not a pleasant person to be around because I was trying my hardest to be a pleasant person in person. But yeah, in the last month, things have been so much better. It was definitely hard to turn in that 2 weeks. I was so afraid. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if they were going to let me go in that very moment or be supportive of me because you hear so many stories about people leaving and breaking contracts and things like that. And I've never done that ever. But it was just time where I put my foot down and really put myself first. And so I turned in my 2 weeks notice. I would say 90% of people were shocked, but very supportive and told me that if I ever wanted to come back, I could. And I thought, oh, that's nice to hear because I thought that if you leave, then you're stale. You're no longer good for TV. That was the messaging that I feel like I grew up with in this industry. And so that's what I thought. Um, but people were supportive. There were some people who told me to my face, you're making a mistake. You are going to regret this. You're going to be so bored wherever you're going, and you are going to come back within a month. It's been a month. I haven't come back. And there's people who said, oh, well, if you don't come back in a month, you'll come back in a year. And to me, when I hear that, I think, that means you my words and my feelings don't hold value at some point. That's how I take it, and more so the reason why I had to leave. But looking back now, I feel like the 2 weeks leading up to when I turned in my 2 weeks, when I turned in my 2 weeks, and then when I actually left that day, I think back now and I feel like I've never self-reflected until now. I've never realized, all of the things that I thought were good about myself that allowed me to survive this long in this industry actually hurt me in my personal life, being a people pleaser. It helped me in my workplace, but then it hurt me outside of work. And it actually hurt me in terms of opportunity as well, right? Because I always said yes, not knowing that other people got paid more or were receiving these opportunities when I was just always the yes woman. But I feel good now.
I love that. I love that. And I'm so proud of you for that because
Mhm.
you're not the only one, right? Like we
Yeah.
were all trained to say yes. Uh, and we have to start self-reflecting to understand that it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
And I also want to point out something extremely important that you just said, and that I loved the words you used, and it's my feelings and my words don't hold value. And
Yeah.
isn't that ironic how we work in the news industry, or we worked in the news industry, where we're putting out words into the world constantly, writing stories, narrating history and reality. And then when it comes to speaking our truth within newsrooms, oftentimes our feelings and our words don't hold value. Like, wow, just let that sink in for a second, because I think you just described beautifully, well, how I used to feel in many of the newsrooms that I was in, and how so many journalists feel in the news industry.
People, when we interview them, their words are valuable to us. It doesn't matter the story. If it's a hard news piece, a feature story, their words are valuable to us. And we choose those sound bites because we really want to paint that picture for people at home to understand, to let them know that we care about these people and you should too.
Wow.
Then we're just people who are helping the news cycle sometimes, and it's so sad. I feel like journalism is so important, and I will love it forever. But I just feel like the industry, there's a lot of dark spots to it, and it's just very unfortunate.
I agree. I agree
Mhm.
100%. I want to ask you, Vicky, do you feel like once, you started working even more as a journalist, realizing that there were these dark spots within the industry, as there is with, uh,
Free industry.
every industry.
Mhm.
It's not just journalism, but did you feel disappointed, or what were those feelings that were coming up for you as you started realizing this?
Yeah, I think before you turn in your 2 weeks, there's a lot of reflection that you have to do. You have to come to terms that you're ending a part of your life. Going to college, they always told me, journalism is a lifestyle. If you can't get with it, you need to get out, right? Not everyone is going to survive in this industry. And I did. I felt like I did everything I had to do, and I envisioned, hopefully someday winning the Lifetime Achievement Awards at 35 years. I really thought that was in my future. And when I came to terms and really talk to myself, that this is what you need to do, this is just what you have to do. And once I realized that, that was saying goodbye to, this older version of me, this version of me who always did everything the right way, or did whatever people wanted. But then I had to figure out that you're not letting yourself down. You're letting go of this vision that you had of yourself. You thought that this journey would be this straight and narrow path, but you didn't realize that there was going to be a fork in the road. You just didn't know until you got there. And so I feel like reporters just have to talk to themselves, really have to think about how they feel, because you're constantly worried about how other people feel, the people that you're interviewing, your bosses, trying to keep them happy, the producers, because you want to make the slot, right? And so they don't have to worry about stacking their shows a certain way. And at some point in time, you have to put yourself first.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Vicky, and then lastly, well, two things. I want to ask you if there's anything else you want to add that maybe I haven't asked you. And then the last question is, what is one thing that you would love to see changed or improved in the news industry from your experience?
Something I'd like to improve. I feel like it should start in the early days, right? A lot of people, they are like me. They know that this is what they want to do ever since they were a kid. But then there are some people who stumble upon it in college. They took journalism 100 and all of a sudden fell in love with it. So I feel like professors are really important. And sadly, a lot of the professors out there haven't been reporters for decades. They don't know what it's like to be a reporter in our world. And I know back then it was a competitive field too, but today it is a beast. And if you're educating your students and telling them, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do, but you don't tell them this is what you do if this happens to you, or if you experience this, or if you later on feel like you quite possibly want to leave the business, you need to tell them that that's okay. Don't hold yourself to this crazy standard. It's okay to pivot. And it should be something that's more transparent and more talked about in schools, instead of just telling them to focus on one path and just stick with it. So I think it needs to start early. People need to hear about different reporters' experiences early on. If you're only hearing about, how, oh, I went from this market to this market, this market, and here I am with an Emmy, and here I am with a Murrow, this is my life. No, there's other reporters who get that and then leave, or people who strive for that and then leave. And it's not because it's their fault, but it's because of what goes on around them. And so early on, I think that conversation needs to be had. And my hope, I met a person the other day who went to college, stumbled on a journalism 100 class, took on all of these internships, did great work, but then decided she didn't want to be a reporter. And she went into PR, And so when I look at me, I think, oh, that's a loss for journalism. I'm a loss for journalism. I could have done even more, if I sticked with it for another 10 years, and I could have, but I didn't want to put my mental health at stake anymore. And thinking about the person who, did all these internships and never actually worked in a real newsroom and got paid and had to deal with all that kind of stress, that's sad, because that person could have contributed so much to our society. And so journalism is so important. We know that, right? It's so important to our democracy, our world, our country. But there's all of these people who can contribute, but they can't.
Yeah, and I love that mental health comes first. If you're depleted, if you're not checking in on yourself, if you're not self-reflecting and sitting with those feelings and just worrying about your bosses, your producers, your news directors, or the people you're interviewing and their feelings and their stories, you're just going to probably continue down that path of being depleted, and you're not going to do any good to yourself or to your audience or the people you're serving, because you're coming from a place of emptiness and burnout and feeling overwhelmed. So mental health, take care of yourselves. And if you want to add anything else,
let me think here. Yeah, I think another thing is maybe professors should talk about the sacrifices. I think they do a little bit, but they don't really tell you how much you could possibly make in your first market, how much you could make in your second market, and how that is not a big jump at all. And then maybe to even your third market, that's not a big jump. I was lucky. I think in my third market, I saw a bump that was actually comfortable. But then I know that that's not the norm for a lot of people. Some people straddle forever in the top 40 market and they still can't live a livable wage. And so I think people, professors, educators, they really need to tell people about what kind of world they're getting into. Because even as I moved to my first market, I still had this glamorized version in my head. It wasn't until my first market in North Dakota when I realized, whoa, there's a lot of stuff that I wasn't told, but you still had to go through with it because this was the love of your life, and you had to keep this love and this passion going. And so I just think people need to be transparent. And so I'm so thankful for you because you're offering a space for reporters to talk about something that is so real and so evident, but not a lot of people know about it until maybe they're like me, in the last 6 months when I really started to investigate and to really...
Journalists, this one's for you, to help you heal, to help you understand your worth, and to help you know you're not alone. So share the love and subscribe to Spotify and YouTube and follow us on Instagram. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo.